Okay, hello and welcome. Sorry, we're 1 minute late. This is Growth RX. I'm Jade Scott, and today I am joined by the fabulous Anne Cooper, all the way from Sydney. Now, Anne is not only an osteopath, a very reputable, very recognised osteopath. Her reputation precedes her. She is a business owner, a passionate educator, a mentor, an advocate for not only osteopathy, but particularly more of late graduate osteopaths. But I do want to read a little bit of a bio because I want to get this right. Anne is a life member of Osteopathy Australia. She's sat on the Osteopathy Board of Australia as the New South Wales member and on the New South Wales Osteopathy Council as president for a full 3-year term. In 2021, she was awarded the Order of Australia for her services in osteopathy, and in her 33 years of practice, she is now engaged with more than 60 new graduate osteopaths. Now, our talk today, Anne, has come with a huge amount of publicity. There are a lot of people that want to hear you speak. We're going to talk to why, but a big welcome from you today, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So I'm just checking we are live in the group, so that is wonderful. Now, before we kind of go into what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, as I promoted it. We're going to talk about contractor versus employment. Most people would assume that we are on two opposite ends of the spectrum. I've been an ambassador for employment for a long time, and the same could be said for you with contracting. But I think equally, we're advocates for fair. And I think that's where we probably more lately have come together behind the scenes in some of our private conversations. And I think people will be surprised to find out they're a little bit more similar than what they think. But, you know, why do you think that there is so much attention on this topic and you and I talking at the moment?
Well, there's a lot of confusion. I think the recent High Court case, which I think finished last year with a solution to the contractor model, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of greed, and there's a lot of unfairness. And then there's the good people, the people who are doing the right thing by themselves and their families and their loved ones, that I'm talking about their own income, and of course the way that they're managing the people that work in their clinic. And I get a lot of phone calls every year from especially young people, actually only young people who started off in practice they believe the promises that have been made to them, and it just hasn't come about. And some of them are incredibly lonely. Some are ready to leave osteopathy, which is such a pity, and they're devastated and they're being bullied with 17-page contracts and threats of legal action, things like that. And I find that really upsetting. So, and I want to help those people, and I do. I usually find them another gig with someone who works in much the same model as me, or at least someone who's fair, and I like to do that. I love osteopathy. It's been wonderful to me. It's been wonderful to me and my family members who became osteopaths. We're all just so lucky to have become osteopaths, to have fallen into this, and I don't like its name being in any way sullied.
And look, I think there's a lot of people watching that agree, but one of the things that we have seen is that between the two models, there is so much ambiguity. And when things are uncertain and when we don't have standards within a profession outside of that of the award, which is obviously a given, the Allied Health Support and Professionals Award that we usually align with, and also contractor models and the requirement of what we know is not to be sham contracting. But this is relatively within the last decade, I would say, new for osteopathy. There's a lot of physiotherapists that are listening, and they're probably a little bit kind of maybe blasé with the concept and why it's getting so much traction at the moment, because they've been employing for some time in physiotherapy and on many, many different models themselves. But back in 2012, when I made the move to employment and taking my whole team across, there was about 8% of the osteopathic profession that were employing. And since then now, I think that's moved somewhere exceeding 20%, but certainly still not. And we're finding out from the new census from Osteopathy Australia where that aligns now, and it could even be closer to 50%. We actually don't know, but we do know that it has gained a lot of popularity of late, and we're going to speak to a lot of those things, and we have got a bit of a structure, and hopefully we can go through lots of that sort of stuff. But before we do, those who don't know you well, Anne, within this space, I'd love to know a little bit more about you. What is a day in the life of Anne look like? What do you do with your days now? Are you still practicing a lot? What's a standard day look like?
Not a lot. Look, I get up, I argue with a 12-year-old about brushing his teeth and eating his breakfast and getting dressed. I walk the dogs. I went to work this morning. I saw 4 patients and I love that. I only see about 8 patients. I think one thing that people have to do, principals have to do when they take new people on, is they have to stand back, which is very hard when you get your self-esteem from your patients. That's actually a big danger in osteopathy, and I'm sure it is in physiotherapy too, that you get your self-esteem from the love of others. But I learned to stand back, and so I only see 8 or 10 patients a week, and they tend to be oldies or newies who have tried everything, and so they want to see the old girl. But my life is very pedestrian. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I love how you say the old girl. Now, within the industry, you have, now some people would call you controversial. I probably certainly wouldn't, but I think you have described yourself with me as straightforward and blunt. How do you think people see you within the industry? Because you are, and I think both of us, I'm probably a little bit less of late with a bit of professional maturity and also understanding social media and how it can sort of come about and how things can be depicted and construed. I sort of stay away from that a little bit, but you are very firm in your opinions in Facebook, would you say? Is that a true?
I think so. Well, yes, as I said before, I'm very grateful to osteopathy, and I think I don't believe in osteopathy. It's not a religion, but I think that its principles work in practice, and I want to defend that. And I particularly want to defend it from the physiotherapication and the exercise physiologyation of osteopathy. That evidence-based medicine, which is absurd, it's an absurdity when it applies to an individual, because you can't go from the general to the particular, and you can't go from the particular to the general. So basically, whatever happens in research has got nothing to do with that patient's laying there on the bench. So I guess I want to protect it without being archaic and without looking at it like it's a religion, and that AT still was, some kind of god or seer or prophet. He wasn't. He was just a bloke, and he learnt it from other people, and it's been going on for centuries and centuries. It's probably the actual oldest profession there is, and medical profession there is. So look, I am blunt. I can be like that. I know them. Can't be any other. I've got a twin sister who's exactly the same. I feel we need to apologise to everybody straight away. But look, the people who people love me, and the people who don't love me, not that there's anything wrong with that, but they're generally people that, some of them, usually boys that I've worked with, and they've had to leave.
And I think it's interesting because in my recent conversations with you, I think part of the reason why I actually love our conversations is because you remind me so much of my mother. And many people say to me that I'm turning into my mother, and therefore I'm kind of turning into you, Anne, in that I am starting to speak up of things when I do think it's fair, and particularly when you're educated or experienced in a certain area. And I'll admit that 10 years ago, with that lack of professional maturity, I didn't articulate things well. And there was even an instance, I think 10 years ago, where I said that some of the philosophies and the concepts were a little bit delayed and almost like a bit of that sort of dinosaur, which I publicly apologised back then. But I think we have had this relationship back and forth for 10 years. And I've done a lot of work in leadership development now and trying to actually better myself and educate myself on how we actually speak so much to these adaptive leadership challenges that we face. And I do think some of the polarity that we see is actually quite toxic for osteopathy and for allied health. When you do have people waving this contractor-only flag and employment-only flag, I do think that there is pros and cons to both, and that's kind of what I want to address today. But I'd love to ask you, before we sort of kick off into things, what does leadership mean to you? I'd love to hear your definition of leadership.
Well, I'm deeply lazy, Jade. I'm very lazy, and believe it or not, I really do not like, and I become befuddled when there's a conflict. But I like leadership to be, I like to take people in at my clinic that generally they come from the country, And I like them because that means they've already made a great leap forward. They've already said, right, I'm out of Horsham, I'm out of Kerrang, and I'm moving to Melbourne to do this really weird sounding course. So they've got that courage. I like them to play a team sport. And I don't want anyone with any eccentric political, dietary, social or religious beliefs. I don't want any, just want normal people who drink and, you know, enjoy a drink, don't drink too much and don't do drugs, all of that stuff. And the reason I like that is because I like people who work in a team. And as an ex-netballer, and can I say a shocking netballer, but nevertheless, I was a very good shooter, but I knew my role in that team, and that was to get those bloody goals in. And I'd say, just stand there, Bluey, that was my nickname, stand there, Bluey, we'll get the ball to you, you shoot the goals. And that's how I see this. I'm shooting the goals, but they're getting the ball to me. And so my role means nothing without them, and their role means nothing without me. My leadership is very much like that. It's the goal shooter. And I could be, as I say, I don't have to do their work, but I really deeply respect these young graduates that have come out over the last 10 years. Over the last 20 years, the UWS graduates were just fantastic. And I think the ones that have come out in the last, say, 4 or 5 years, even though those ones that have been really hamstrung by COVID, turned up, again, played team sport, came from Warport, all that stuff, nothing eccentric about them, and knew that they were duds. They knew that they were no good at the bench, but by God, they were so driven to be good at what they've done, and they've become like that. And I'm so grateful to them. I was going to say proud, but I don't own them. I'm actually grateful to them. So it's very much a commensurate type relationship that I have with them. And if that's the leadership, my job is to teach them or to show them or to guide them to think osteopathically and also medically. I mean, they've got to unlearn that everyone's got cancer, and they've got to unlearn that exercise is the answer. But, oh, that rhymes. But they do have to take into account that there's lots of nasty things that we will be seeing all the time, melanomas, whatever it may be. So, you know, my job is just to be there, and yeah.
And I do think, you know, one of the things that I'm really grateful for is to be able to provide a platform like this, because even in our recent conversations, which I've really actually quite enjoyed, I think it's nice to be able to see people beyond the words and the comments on Facebook, which is where people do form a lot of judgment from. I was guilty of that.
I was chased off Facebook because I'm too old.
Gosh, isn't Facebook for the older ones? If you're chased off and you're out of that window, you must be really old. So where I would, I guess, love to start is the current climate. And to those who are watching, I apologise, there probably is going to be a little bit more of an osteopathic focus on this. We are osteopaths, and we are speaking to a very different remuneration structure that we're seeing within osteopathy and probably chiropractic and even myotherapy at the moment. So we're not necessarily speaking to physios, a small minority of physios. But what are you seeing in this current climate that is the remuneration models that we're seeing from your perspective? What are the 3, I guess, pillars of remuneration that people can choose to offer or choose to accept as a graduate or even use out in practice?
Well, I think there's the model that I use, which is, yes, it's a dinosaur model, but it worked, which is I just pay a percentage and I keep dropping that percentage. In Sydney, we charge $130 for a treatment. I do. People laugh at that. It's too cheap, they say, really. Other people are charging nearly $300. And the associates start off on paying a 40% service fee. That's what I do. And then as they improve, it'll drop down to 35. Now, that does sound extremely generous, but I do have to reward them, for coming to Sydney, because we don't have a university here in Sydney. We have it in Queensland and Lismore, and we have the Victorians, and of course the English and New Zealand ones. So I have to reward them for coming and make it easy for them to live in Sydney, which is expensive, probably not that much more expensive than Melbourne, but nevertheless, it costs to live in a beautiful city like Sydney. And so I want them to have a great life, which means that I think a first year graduate last year, he earned, I think, 115,000. You know, but it was during COVID too, and COVID we were ridiculously busy because obviously they could come, but yet they earn about 100 to 130,000, and which means I get whatever I get out of that, which is great.
And that's a wonderful job. To any graduates kind of looking who want to earn lots of money, and that's fabulous. But outside of that, I mean, obviously none of that is a guarantee. It's a guarantee for you because you've got a great reputation, you've got a great business, and you know how many patients that you can provide. So let's stay with that before we sort of deep dive down into additional contractor models, simple percentage split. Let's talk about the two types of contractor models. In one model, you pay a service fee, which is sort of like a rent and facilities fee that fluctuates based upon patient numbers. And then you've got a true contractor role where you are paid for your services plus GST. So the role differs depending on how GST exchanges hands. That blows a lot of graduates' minds as it is, first and foremost, because there's already differences within those two models. Can you speak to the other model a little bit?
Which other model? The
one where you are a true contractor and then you get paid for your services plus GST.
That's what I do. They receive 100% of their take.
Okay. And how does GST exchange hands?
There's GST in that, and that's their problem. They have to pay that.
So you pay that to them and they pass it on.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So there are some models which are more a rent and facilities model where I'm going to charge you rent plus GST and then you have to claim it back. There are those models as well.
That's for them to talk to their accountant. Isn't it amazing how accountants who are supposed to be experts all have a different answer to this? But what I do is what I'm told to do, which is basically, as I said, is GST, because it attracts GST.
Yeah, and that does also align in a true contractor model. And this is not a talk about sham contracting, but there is a very clear distinction between the fact that contractors can generally do what they want. They can pick and choose their own hours. They can come and go as they please. And outside of that, if you are stipulating or directing or guiding what that should be and where their shift should be and what they should do and approving leave, then you are somewhat blurring the line. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and you're putting yourself at so much risk by doing that. One reason I like the contractor model is because every doctor and every dentist and psychologist is working the contractor model. So people that say it's an archaic system are wrong, unless every other healthcare practitioner is wrong too. I like the way it reflects the Australian system. I mean, they have their own registration with AHPRA. They have their own insurance. They are independent contractors. And I think making them an employee is what blurs the lines, because where does vicarious liability come in then? If someone's an employee and they knock someone's head off, the employer is just as liable for damages as is that particular practitioner. And that makes my skin crawl. I want the person to be completely independent. Yeah.
So look, I can certainly extend on that. I pay insurance for my team, and I pay that across the board for up to, I think it's about $60 million worth of liabilities, which if something really goes wrong, that's about 3 practitioners in a year, which you hope would never happen. So I'm fully insured. But within our contracts as well, we've certainly got a recommendation that practitioners outside of the employed insurance for the company have their own insurance as well. So back in the late 80s, the law changed and a patient can actually only choose to sue one commodity, whether that be the practitioner themselves, whether they're employed or not for negligence, or a company. But they can only choose to sue one. And we actually don't know at the time, if you've got a disgruntled patient, are they going to choose to sue the practitioner or are they going to choose to sue the overarching company? We actually don't know, which is why you actually need both means of insurance. So across the board, regardless of what the model is, it's highly recommended that practitioners have their own insurance because you don't know which way it's going to go.
Well, they have to, don't they? They have to have it to be registered too, don't they?
Exactly. So now in regards to that autonomy, so let's kind of move across to that employment side of things, which is sort of the other model. Obviously there's rental agreements, which is a little bit different. That's a true sole trader. You rent a room in a private practice, you come in, you've got a fixed rental. Really, rent and facilities, we can have them fluctuating on certain models, but really we've got rental that is usually fixed. You're running your own show. It's true that though in a contractor model, the argument is that you are running your own business. Yeah, you're coming in and you're indirectly running your own business under the umbrella of somebody else. Yeah. What if a new graduate doesn't want to do that? what if they're kind of forced equally into that and they don't really want to run their own business, and they sort of want to know what the guarantee is going to be if they've upended their life and moved to country Queensland or New South Wales. But what if that kind of almost is, well, hang on a minute, you're coming to work for me, but you are running your own show. We're hearing elements of that confusion down here as well with graduates who are only offered a contractor agreement, and therefore they're sort of forced into their own sole trader environment.
Everyone in my clinic has been offered the ability to become an employee, but no one's ever taken it up.
Did everybody hear that? And so, Anne, you're saying you would employ?
Well, I have. When I sponsored Dorian to come from France, he contacted me and I said, oh, right, okay. But I said, it's not going to cost me a cent, Dorian. And I employed him and had to pay bloody super and workers' comp and all of that palaver. But as soon as he got his residency, he stopped it straight away. But yes, everyone has the ability to do that. As I say, no one's ever taken it up.
Yeah, and based upon some of your thoughts and some previous comments, the reason why you do, and you have verbally said that you believe a contractor model is the more favourable model, I don't want to say right and wrong, but more favourable. Why do you think that is? Why would you say to a new grad, you want to get a contractor model, and this is why? Here is your chance.
Because they are going to get financial benefits that don't cost me anything, in the form of the massive amount of tax deductions that a person running their own business can get. And they are huge. The only way to wealth in this country, unless, you work for some big corporation, Gina Reinhardt or something, is to have your own business. It's the only way, and it's only because of the tax deductions. And it's a big, dirty secret that most people in Australia don't get. Employees certainly don't get it. The way the tax deductions and allowances given to business are huge. And that's why it's better for them. And it costs me as a business owner nothing for them to get those benefits.
Yeah. So what about if they're 21 years old, they're just entering the workforce and they don't actually really care for those business benefits? They actually would rather some security in a guaranteed income that is employment, and actually not have to worry about tax and putting in BASs and tax returns. There are some, and when it comes to, and in my previous study that I've focused on the last 2 years, there's 7 things that motivate us in the workplace to be happy and fulfilled in the workplace. Now, one of them is obviously money and being remunerated in the right way, whether it be a guaranteed income, bonuses, incentives, salaries, you name it. That's one. The other one is sort of, we have to provide some sort of career pathway and roles and responsibilities in accordance with that. But outside of that, we've got appreciation from a boss and support. You've got incentives with mentoring, CPD, personal professional growth. You've got acknowledgement from peers and a great peer and team culture, autonomy and flexibility, and then meaningful service. So what if you've got a new grad that actually doesn't care, who just says, hey, I just want to be guaranteed at least the award, if not above, which is, reasonable, and the ability to potentially make more money, but I want a guarantee. So I did a survey back in 2018, which is really outdated now, across 270 of the final year students across the 3 universities. And they said that they wanted a guaranteed secure income as a number one, in conjunction with mentoring and training, and also, so it was salary and then security. So would it not be fair to say that an employment model or a guaranteed base salary does provide that for some of these grads?
Well, I must say, when Harry started last year, Harry Stent from Horsham, started last year, I said to him, look, we don't know what it's going to be like. It was a new world last year because of COVID, and we didn't know what it was. And I said, I'll guarantee you $1,000 a week until you're making more than that. I only had to pay him for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I still actually got all the money back properly. So, look, to be honest, Jade, if someone said I don't want to do it, I probably wouldn't take them on, because I like the nous of the ones that are going to run their own business. I love to see them fiddling about on their iPads with their cryptocurrency and spreadsheets and all of that stuff. I really like it. It's stupid, but I like to see them becoming excited about the money that they can, and I know money is just a metaphor for energy, isn't it? It's that's all it is. And it's not that I'm greedy, I'm not. And I don't think they're greedy, but it is like a game, and they're winning that game. And I like the fact that they become really eager, and that the way that they make more money is to offer better service. Everyone's a winner.
Yeah. And we run a fee for service model. That is the way it works. If we're not treating patients, we're not being able to charge a revenue.
And if we're not doing a good job, so that patient goes home and says, what is the figures? I think if someone does a good job, the patient will tell 3 people. If they do a bad job, they'll tell 7 people. And the reason they don't tell that many people when they've got a good job is because they want to be able to get an appointment next time. But if you do a good job, then you get more patients, and then you do even better. So, as I say, everyone's a winner.
Yeah. So with this, and you know, a lot of the recent surveys I've done in my recent education is on generational change, and we know that we've kind of gone from the baby boomers to the Gen Ys, to the X's, to the Ys, and now we've got these Gen Zs coming through, and we need to change our philosophy and our communication as we go through, and their wants and needs are changing. But we also know that they were considerably affected by COVID. And so when some of these securities, or when clinics had to close and only see urgent care, down here in Victoria, we really suffered. I think we had a collective of 6 weeks where we couldn't open, or if we did, even beyond that into the 3-month mark, we were severely restricted by who we could see with triage processes and all the rest. Now, my team loved going through that process because they had a guaranteed income. And they were topped up with JobKeeper, and I know sole traders had that sort of thing. But, you know, they are coming out with some reservations about security. So they're kind of torn between people who are offering this security and maybe playing off COVID a little bit sometimes, but then also others saying, hey, get a contractor model because you're just going to be uncapped and unlimited. But you know, and I know, and I can speak to my own model now, is that, you know, I offer a base salary as an absolute guarantee with a bonus structure on top of that, that mirrors and aligns with what you would see in a contractor model and what you could earn. Now, in the beginning, obviously, there has to be that balance, and I'm going to show some figures in a minute, but, you know, there is good and bad in everything. We're hearing down here, it's a very different, so let's talk about the climate down here in Victoria. And the reason why I started flapping my mouth around about why it was unfair is because, you know, a recent census in 2017 from Osteopathy Australia was suggesting that in Victoria, 50% of osteopaths weren't earning above 50K in their first 3 years in practice. But that's way below the award. So I turned around and said, give an award guarantee, at the very least offer an award. Or what I did when I was contracting, and I still run both models, I've got contractors and I've got employees, but give a guarantee, you know, if they're saying that, okay, well, employment, you know, is not the right way to go and contracting is it not fair to suggest that on a contractor model, there should be some type of retainer? Equivalent to what you said, I'm going to give you $1,000 no matter what before I earn a cent. But on a 50% split, if you see 10 patients in your first week, which I did when I first started, I got 50% of that. And so I think that's where my background comes in from in regards to being fair, is there has to be some sort of guarantee that aligns with the award, whether you're on a contractor model or not.
Well, if they can, and look, as you say, the climate in Victoria is quite different to the climate in New South Wales, Queensland, Darwin, South Australia, Perth, even Tasmania and New Zealand, where there's a paucity of osteopaths. I know, except for that little thing up at Byron Bay where there's 15 million of them, all in competition with each other. We have to pay people to come here effectively. We have to do that. And yes, that's why I said, look, you may be nervous coming here, and yes, you will have to find a place to live and all that stuff. And here's the thing, but it didn't matter because they were okay. And I guess it's up to the associate or contractor, whatever we call them, to do their investigation to find out what these clinics are like. You know, I hear some of these rural and regional practices who constantly are advertising for people to come and work there, you know, come and live near the beach and blah, 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 and then don't pay them or underpay them. And then they wonder and complain that there's something wrong with new graduates. They're not like we used to be, Anne. Yes, they are. They're smarter than us. They're better educated than us. And they won't take shit anymore. And it's not okay for you to do that. If you want them to come to you and you're not in Melbourne, then you must pay them. You must make it easier. More than a relocation allowance, because $2,000, I think, is what you're able to pay in Melbourne, remembering, of course, that they're mostly already in Melbourne, but $2,000 might pay for the moving of the bed or something like that. They need more than that, or they need a better income. But that, when Harry started that, he had to be there 5.5 days a week. He had to walk around, hang out with all the other osteopaths, talk about osteopathy and treat whatever patients there were there. So as I say, it really didn't cost me anything, and it put his mind at rest and put my mind at rest, because I hadn't invited him to do something which was just not going to be managed.
Yeah. So I think, and before I'm going to show some figures that and a slide that I've sort of put together to depict just how skewed these variables are when it comes to income, because you made a comment before, and I want to sort of get some clarity on that, who are being hugely underpaid. In the eyes of the award, as long as you're paying the award, you're not being underpaid. Where the underpaid is if you're smashing 60 patients a week and you're just on the award with no bonus structure, then yes, you are absolutely being underpaid on an employment model if you're not actually having those additional patients being reflected over time.
Before you go to that screen, I just want to talk about a young woman that called me last year or early this year, who said, I work 5.5 days a week. I get the award, 63,000. What she was offered was 73,000, including superannuation. So when superannuation went up on June 30th this year, or July 1st this year, her wage didn't go up. Effectively, that superannuation increase came out of her actual wage. And she said, because these people are not stupid, she said, I make all my wages on a Monday, and every other patient I see after Monday goes straight to the principal. She's not staying, and she didn't stay.
You can't make 63 grand on a Monday. You can't do that.
She said,
I mean, you can't make an out, but to extend on that with the salary inclusive of, so we do that. That's exactly the same as a contractor model. If you're getting paid 50%, your super is included in that. You're meant to pay 50%. Or if you're getting paid 60%, am I right in saying that your super comes out of that 60%?
Well, we don't do super.
No, but from them, they have to take this. If they want to contribute to their own super, it comes out of their contribution.
Well, that's a conversation I have with them. It's absolutely mad when you're a young person and you don't own a home to put money away for 40 years in some SPIV's bank account, which is not yours, when you don't own a home. As long as you cannot, until you own your home, you avoid paying super.
Look, and I agree with that, but this is the whole reason why contractor models are under the spotlight, is because you've got so many sole traders. It's a $2.3 billion industry that the government is saying, we've got all these contractors out there who aren't putting money into super. So what's happening now is they're going back to these practice principles saying, hang on a minute, they didn't pay their super, you owe me super. And then the roll-on effect is that there's 3, even last year, who went through mediation where these principals were actually hit with that super contribution because they weren't paying it. This is where clinic owners are getting petrified by this fear mongering, even whether it is, but it's actually being followed through, is they're going, well, hang on a minute, I can't sleep at night. And that's where I came from. I went, hang on a minute, I can't sleep at night for fear of this back payment of 7-year super because my contractor isn't contributing the superannuation to the governing bodies who are asking for it, and then all the cards fall down. And so it's this fear, and we see this openly, that you've got these poor clinic owners who are trying to do the right thing. When a contractor leaves, they hit them for 7 years back pay of super. This is happening. We know this is happening. So isn't it right for clinic owners to be petrified?
Well, as I say, every doctor in the GP practice in the country, every dentist, every psychologist is doing it. I just think you have to set it up right. You have to, that the patient knows and the practitioner knows that they're working under their ABN and that they are responsible for the care and that they are the practitioner and the entity that's responsible for everything. So they are their own small business and they can pay their super when they're ready.
And I think that's true. I think, you know, contracts are a big thing. You talk about that a lot and setting up these contracts accurately. But, and here's the other, and the reason why I changed across is that I did find that I was trying to build a business. I was busting my ass. And I would sort of open a business, and then after sort of 5 years, there was a turnover and people would kind of go off and then start their own, which I supported them in at the time. There's probably people watching now who worked at Western Region Health at some point and have their own practices. But what started to happen over time is because they run their own business, the amount of, if I had $1,000 for every time I heard, but I'm a contractor, you don't actually start to get a say. If your first person is oh, somebody's jumped into our Zoom.
Oh, that was me. I just clicked on a name that came up on my screen.
Oh, did you know you've let somebody in, Anne?
I didn't know who it was. Oh, I do know who it was.
Well, if you're in the chat, if you don't mind, that's okay. I can remove it. That's okay.
Oh,
so I think, you know, that's the thing for me is I would have contractors who rightly have their own business. And if their first patient at 9:30 cancelled and the next one wasn't until 11, they would say to me, I'm not coming until 11 because I'm not getting paid. And you don't have a leg to stand on. But then when you've got if we're meant to be dedicated towards our patients, and I have 5 or 6 patients call up and admin are on the phones from 8 o'clock and they've got nowhere to put them because that contractor's decided that they're not coming until 11. How do you grow a business when you're at the ransom of your contractors? And I know a lot of that is personal, but it does happen. And so if you want to have a say in your business that you've worked really hard towards, then it does make sense that you have to move across to a model that gives you a little bit of say. Correct? Or
it hasn't been a problem for me, but I guess my business isn't as your business is huge. I think I've got 12 people, I don't know, 10 osteopaths or something like that. It hasn't been a problem. If they continued to do that, if they didn't want to come in, I would say, right, well, I'll take those times off you. We'll go back, because in the contract, these things can be changed.
Yeah.
If one person wants it. So I would just say, right, that's it.
Yeah.
You will lose the ability to earn your money at that point in time.
Yeah. So there has to be, you know, regardless of the model. Yeah, there has to be that give and take, definitely. So I think, and the hard thing for me is, with some context, I knew that I wanted to start employing and I wanted to be able to provide all of the entitlements and all of those sorts of things that employees got. And I actually saved up for an entire 12 months to know that I had the money there to guarantee an income to somebody before I paid myself, before I took a single cent. Because when you put somebody on as an employee, and this is where now I'm certainly speaking with some bias, so feel free to hit me back with some queries, but it is really hard. And so that's why I wanted to show some figures. And I've kind of gone off roughly the average of what new grads would come in. So even if some clinics are charging $100, on some tiered structures, new grads are probably charging about 90. So I've kind of gone off that with my figures. But on a 50% split, if you're a contractor, to take away just above the award at 68,000, that's a guarantee of 34 patients. Now, I know that there are so many clinics down here in Melbourne that cannot guarantee 34 patients as soon as a contractor comes through the door. So often what we do is anything less than that 34 patients, they start getting higher. So if you've got a contractor that comes in and only sees 17 patients in their first week and takes home 68,000, they're actually taking home 100%. Is that not the best percentage split you've ever seen?
Well, not for me, it's not.
But if somebody saw 17 patients a week on your model in the first week, they would get paid for half of them, which means they'd be on that remuneration. They'd be under the award for that first week that they came in.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just work out now what they would get at that.
Well, I mean, you charge a lot higher rate, so it's very different for you.
Yeah.
And this is where I guess I'm kind of saying that some of these clinics in saturated areas down here, if 17 patients a week sustains the minimum award salary, then really, if you're wanting to align with that, then you shouldn't be taking a cent until 17 patients are seen.
17 patients a week, they'd still get $1,300 with my job.
Yeah. So, and then that's the thing, you can afford to do that if you're paying higher, if you've got the patient numbers there. But there are some clinics who put on a new grad, they've barely got an overflow, or they can't push their overflow onto them, and they're scrambling around seeing 1 or 2 patients a day.
Oh, Jade, I think this is a lot of chest beating. I think this is all the people that boast about having their satellite clinics, and then you speak to the poor sod who's sitting alone in the satellite clinic, seeing 1 patient at 9 a.m. and 1 at 5, and she has to also do the cleaning. Don't take people on if you don't have an overflow, or unless you're ready to stand back.
Yes, and I couldn't, regardless of what the model is, regardless of employment or contracting, if you don't have the patient numbers there, you don't get to put somebody on and have them build your business up. And look, there's probably a lot of people out there.
That's where employment's great. That's where employment's great, because you're not going to do it if you're going to have to pay them, and whether they see patients or not.
And this is where I want to speak to where employment goes wrong now too, because there's a lot of people think that I'm waving this employment flag. I hear of clinics as well who are casually employing, where they'll put somebody on for a 5-hour shift, and then of course, if they don't have the patient numbers to sustain that 5-hour shift, they will cut that shift with notice, or they will drop it down to 3 hours within a day's notice, because 3 hours is the minimum casual shift. And that's wrong too. That's absolutely wrong too. Or you're seeing a new grad who comes in on a base salary, and then they're smashing 60 patients a week without any incentive structure. Of course, they're going to burn out. So what I want to highlight there is that there is certainly bad in what I'm seeing in employment as well. Now, we are aligned with the awards. As long as you are paying the award, then absolutely you're doing all the things in the lies of the law. It comes down to you as a person. If you know that somebody is billing 250 grand and you're paying out 70, then you're taking home 30%, which depending on what you offer. If you offer all the mentoring in the world and you're all of this and that, depends on what people are getting as well. And there's a big difference as well, whether you're getting full-time reception, or whether you're having to do some reception and support, whether you're going out to, build up numbers. So this is kind of where this ambiguity starts to set in, and there is no standard for this. Because you're obviously passionate about, what do you hear, I guess, do you hear of firstly bad contractor models, or, if you are hearing about where employment is kind of burning out, is that aligning with what you're hearing? And why you're so passionate?
When I hear about a bad contractor model, it's usually that the practitioner just hasn't paid the associate, and that's that. There's always an excuse, and so that's what. But when with the employment model and the bonus model, it's generally that they are seeing a lot of patients, or not many at all. But whatever it is, the bonuses don't happen.
Yeah,
there's always a reason for not handing the bonus over. And so these kids, and they can't live on that money. You can't live on $800. And again, that's a different thing in Melbourne, because maybe they can live at home.
Yeah.
No,
and I do think, and Kevin's made a great point. If you're seeing 17 patients a week in 5 patients, then that's awesome money. In 5 hours, then that's awesome money. Depending on whether you're working 20 minutes or 30 minutes, then when you can kind of start to do the math over whether you're seeing 17 patients over 5 days or 17 patients in 1 day, as you said earlier, people do start to do the math. So we're talking about huge outliers. And the problem is that usually the worst models are the ones that are under the microscope and who have the loudest voices to speak of. When somebody has been burned by a terrible model, it should, and rightly so, should get a lot of contract. But what I think we don't do enough in osteo is champion the models that do it well, whether it be a rental model that is working really well, or a contractor model like yours that is doing really well, or an employment structure that actually does have additional bonuses that are paid out. Are we not doing that enough? Are we not trying to create some benchmarks of where it's done well, and we're too busy pointing fingers at where it goes wrong, and therefore no solutions come from that?
The squeaky wheels get the oil, they get the attention. But we could ask our professional association they can't force anything, but they should be. I think Osteopathy Australia should be providing a standard. Now, whether it be a standard contractor relationship or a standard employment relationship, but I think there needs to be something on the website that says this is the very least that you should expect from the practitioner and from the principal. And if the contract that you've been offered, the 17 pages that you've been offered, differs widely from this, you have to wonder why. You have to wonder why.
And I do think, I think to speak to Osteopathy Australia, I think they do give those guidelines. They have got a HR team. There is clear guidelines of what a contractor looks like, and there are clear guidelines of what the award is stipulating. And I don't know that the OA can independently govern every single contract that we see.
It can't govern anyone, but it can give guidelines.
Yes. And I think that those guidelines are there, but then it's when people and how people interpret those guidelines, because every single clinic is different. We see this across, even physio or chiro, is we don't know what goes underneath. We don't know what mentoring structures are put in place. We don't know what people are getting beyond that salary. And I can tell you now, there is so much value that comes from some clinics beyond remuneration. There is culture. There is training, there is guidance and support, there is 24-hour access to a senior who can help you through a difficult case or who is there available to you on weekends. There are huge differences way beyond salary that depicts what a good job is and what isn't. Would you agree that they need to look beyond that? And what do you say to a new grad? How do you tell a new grad what to look for?
There has to be trust, doesn't there? I ask them to do their due diligence. I say, if you don't like or you don't trust what I'm saying, and God knows why they should trust, because they've usually been burned, ring up someone who works here. Don't talk to me. In fact, the people who are there may not want someone else to come on because, obviously everyone's to some extent in competition with each other. But do your due diligence. Find out from other people that have worked there. These people that are advertising all the time, find out why. It's not because they're too busy, because they're losing staff.
Yeah, and I do think it is, when you are employing somebody, it is based upon 38 hours a week, and they might be taking home 70 grand. On a contractor model, you probably could take home and earn 70 grand in 2 days, really. So, there's differences in that as well in regards to time versus revenue too. So that's really important to look at too. But I sat down with a couple of interns last week and you could see their mind was just blowing up, the poor things. And I tried to give guidance and statistics, but you don't know till you get in there. And, some of the things that I would suggest is trying to book an appointment online with the practice principal. If you can get in with the practice principal tomorrow and they've got 3 appointments, they certainly don't have an overflow for you. Yeah. So little things like that. What other tips would you suggest if you're trying to do your due diligence? What does that look like?
No, I can't think of anything else except for to find out from previous people or current people what it's like to work there.
Yeah.
And again, as I said before, you can take that contract to an accountant and they will, or a solicitor, and these people have no idea. They have no idea whatsoever. Our contract is 1 page. It's 1 page and it's about 5 paragraphs. And during COVID last year, when we had 4 people have to leave because of their vaccination stance, I engaged a very expensive George Street solicitor and gave her my contract, and she said, that's fine, that ticks all the boxes. So they don't have to be complex. And if it is complex, and if it is 17 pages, you've got to say, why? This is a pretty simple relationship that I have.
Yeah. And I mean, we are still seeing things in there like a kilometre radius. You can't work within a 100-kilometre radius. I mean, we know that doesn't hold up in court. I've had clean contracts for the last 20 years and I've never ever pushed back on any of it because sometimes it takes too much effort and annoyance. If somebody wants to open up next to you, let them. I think what you can enforce is a restraint period. You can certainly restrain somebody with, and this is what I'm talking with employment, but in a true contractor role, they can pretty much could they pick up their database and move it down the road?
Well, of course I can. We don't own the database. I mean, I'd be pretty unhappy if they actually copied the database. I don't know how you do that with Clinico. I heard of one guy in Melbourne who, again, was working very hard and only on a very low wage, probably the award wage. And so he went to work somewhere else also as a contractor. And the initial clinic has stopped him from using his own name.
Wow.
You know, he can call himself NEC or whatever, but not his real name. I mean, this is a kind of thuggery. If they have to do that to a new graduate, then it says that they're on shaky ground, aren't they?
Yeah.
Doing that.
So I want to share a screen with,
Yeah.
I guess, kind of some figures, just to kind of talk to just how different it can actually look. So can you see that little pie chart there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're looking at, and let's just say that the award at the moment, a level 1 pay point 5 entry level sits at about 63,000 at the moment, sort of, you know, if you include super in that. And the reason why I'm saying including super is because this is based upon patient numbers to be able to hit your revenue, okay? This is basically probably 62 plus super, let's call it that, okay? But in regards to earnings that they need to actually earn and are paid out, whether it's on a 50% split or an inclusive of super, that's roughly what it looks like. And this is based upon $90 working 44 weeks of the year, okay? So if you only see 21 patients in your first week and you still get that as a guarantee, you're actually taking home 80%.
Yeah.
If we kind of then go the extension of that on a you know, basically on 34 patients. Now this is over full time. So to speak to Kevin's argument is those 34 patients could be seen in 2 days, in which case it's probably not great if you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs over 5 days of the week. On a contractor model, 50% split at 34, if you do that in 2 days is wonderful. But just to speak to a full-time role, it usually to bring home or bring in enough revenue for somebody to take home 68 and you to take home 68, which is aligned with the award, is about 34 patients. If they see 46 patients, and I've used this figure here because this usually aligns with physiotherapy, which sits, you know, somewhere between 37 to 45 inclusive or plus GST. It takes about 46 patients sort of on that percentage, and that's where it gets quite low. And there's a lot of osteos looking at that because, you know, based upon our average, it's not common for an osteo, I would say, to be taking home sort of a 35 to 40% split. If we look on a contractor role here, down the bottom on a 50% split, it at 21 patients, that's only 41,000. Now, if you can do that in 2 days, that's wonderful. If you're doing that across 5.5 days in your first week, it's not that great. On a 60% split, they're taking home a little bit more, but it's still below the award. 21 patients is still below the award on a contractor model. And then we're going to start creeping up. Let's just say on a contractor model, 34 patients at a 50% split is about 67. So that's a little bit more aligning with the award now in the figure above. And then if they're saying 46 patients on a contractor model, they're taking home 91. So that's much better. So you can see the differences in the dynamic. And if I move it across into a spreadsheet here, if we look at the left-hand side being a contractor and the right-hand side, you can see a clear difference between the two of a favourable model. Now, we can see at 21 patients, an employment model guarantee is more favourable. At 46 patients, a contractor model is more favourable. At about 34 patients, they're pretty much aligned on a 50% split. The difference is, and this is part of getting to the end of something like this, going, okay, well, what's the solution? At 46 patients, and let's call it over full time, not over 1 or 2 days, over a full-time week, and let's call it 30 consulting hours if you see 46 patients, a base salary should be topped up with a bonus structure to align with that 91 grand, and a contractor model takes home that 91 grand. They're both inclusive of super, but that's where the problem is if you've got one that is way down the left-hand side and you're not seeing enough patient numbers, or way up the right-hand side without a bonus structure, either model could be seen to be bad. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, the problem is, it's a different environment. It's a different climate. The people that work at my clinic are on between 30 and 35%. Only in the first few months are they on 40%. Again, because I must attract them. They're being paid $130 for the thing, and no one works more than 25 hours.
Yeah.
So they could go and work somewhere else. None of them do. But well, someone is. Jordan is, because he's setting up his own practice on the other side of Sydney, places I've never been to. But that's just a temporary thing. So look, we're not comparing apples with apples here. Simply not. The outside of Melbourne, things have to be better for people if you're going to attract and retain them.
And it does. Like if you're having somebody up in their whole life, and your job is going to attract somebody who does have a bit of that grit and determination and wants to and is motivated by money, and somebody who probably just wants learning and stability is probably not going to need to go up there. So I think that's the thing, is we need to attract these new graduates to the right job. The pay, regardless of whatever the model needs to be, is fair and reputable. And I've got some of my team watching that would love to earn that amount of money in 25 hours. Now, they're probably spread over 38 hours and go, oh my gosh, please don't leave me. I love you. But, I think there's so many dynamics to this, which is why there are so many conversations around this, and why I find so many people point fingers, because it's so hard. We've just had a 1 hour conversation and probably still got no further than, hey, your model is actually really great and aligns with the people that work with you. My team, I could probably, right now I do surveys to make sure that they're really happy and that they're aligned and they're remunerated well. But the reality is, if you're not looking after your team and you're not remunerating well, they are going to leave regardless of what the model is, right?
Mm-hmm. You said it before, it's got to be about fairness. Can't be, we know about prosperity theology, we know about greed is good and all of that stuff. You can follow all of those things, but your staff will leave. If you're not fair, and if they're not growing financially and professionally, they will leave. And our aim is to keep them. So we have to pay them to stay.
Yeah.
And look, which isn't to say that people who stay in Melbourne don't have grit or don't have courage. But it is an adventure. And if you can have an adventure and you're a young person who's just finished 5 years at RMIT or VU, whatever it may be, and you want an adventure, then generally you go north, doesn't matter, or west for that matter, but you want an adventure. So we do kind of get a self-selecting type of person that comes to Sydney. But it all comes down to fairness. And the fact is that I want a bloody good income too. And I have a bloody good income.
Yep.
And I'm sure you do too, but it's not like I don't work for it. It's not like I'm sitting there, smoking marijuana and drinking gin. I have my thumb on the business. I watch everything and I talk about everything, and I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
It can't be a laissez-faire approach to running a business.
Yeah. And I do think, from this, we're in total agreement that, if the patient numbers aren't there, there should be some type of retainer on a contractor model. But also, if you are employing and somebody is start to see some high patient numbers, they should be rewarded with some kind of bonus structure once expenses are covered. Yeah. So, I think, it's really disappointing, Anne, that we didn't get into a bit of biffo today. No. I think we would have liked to give the people what they wanted to see, but we haven't. So I'm sorry if you're disappointed. But it's really lovely to be able to give you a chance to extend on your voice, and you can hear your passion. And you were awarded, at the Order of Australia, and you can see why that is. After 33 years in this industry, you are so passionate. I admire you for your delivery and your inability to back down when you see things that aren't fair. And, I feel like I'm very much the same. I'd love to know now, before we kind of finish up, what is your excitement for the future and what is your fears for the future, if you can kind of hone it down into a couple as
I mentioned it before, that we become, look, one thing I do insist, while I've got their ear, new graduates, while they're listening to me, which is probably about the first 2.5 years, I do insist that there's no exercise sheets being handed out. We do not treat with exercise. We do not treat with classes. Our treatment, and that's what makes us special, is that they get 35 to 40 minutes of hands-on care and a loving treatment. There's always a love involved there somewhere in a successful practice. And I'm still thrilled by what happens when you apply those osteopathic principles. You're in the dark. We're all in the dark. No one knows how the human body works or how it doesn't work. No one knows. But it seems to me, after 33 years, nearly 34, that those principles guide us through the valley of death, and we come out through the other side, and the patient says, oh my God, that's so weird. I forget. I remember one woman a couple of years ago brought a mother in who was deaf as a post, and afterwards she rang me up, and she said, what did you do to my mother? And I thought, oh shit, I've killed her. What have I done? And I said, oh, I don't know. And she said her hearing has come back completely after 30 years. Now, who knows how that works? Who knows? I have no idea. But when I was nursing, a woman fell off a trolley. A blind woman fell off one of the gurneys, and her vision came back. That was completely ignored within the hospital. Everyone talked about it. But why was it ignored? Osteopathy, I like the fact that it's iconoclastic, it's radical, it's subversive, and I want it to stay that way. I always want it to stay that way. Forget EBM, as I said, it doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to one-on-one care, which is N equals 1. That's what I'm frightened of, is it'll stop being iconoclastic, it'll stop being subversive, but I'm excited about it still. And I love seeing young people come down and say, oh my God, that was amazing. Young, smart people with a beautiful education, which they've all had a beautiful education, and they're thrilled by what they've seen. You know, can't really go wrong.
And it's incredibly humbling to hear somebody like yourself who still loves osteopathy after 33 years. And I think, you know, to hear that, particularly when, you know, there is so much talk about burnout and all these sorts of things. You've been in this, you've been doing this for 33 years, and you still love it. You are still passionate about finding what is fair. You stand up, you step up, you show up, and other people around you do too. And you've created some incredible opportunities for a lot of people, and you've created a huge amount of joy for me, either sitting behind the scenes and me messaging you privately going, Anne, but also listening. I think as well, I think you do listen, and I think you've opened up my eyes to a lot of things, and that is that, you know, regardless of what we advocate for, we are both ambassadors for fair. And it's really nice to be able to sit at this table and share this with you. And we got away without swearing too, Anne. Both of us swear, and we didn't swear.
I won't.
But thank you so much for joining me today, and I guess thrashing this out. I don't think we've created any grand solutions.
Look, I think in the end, your system works, my system works, but as long as it's fair, any system is going to work. It's when it's unfair that they call me, and I'm sure they call you and say, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So, you know.
And I think it is. I think that the takeaway is really, as a new graduate, spending some time and talking to people across different models, and not taking things without doing your due diligence, as you say, and speaking to previous team members. I think if you know, maybe not those who have necessarily exited, but those who are in the current climate, in the existing practice and working there, get their telephone numbers, ask them, how do you find your pay? How do you find the culture? How do you find the mentoring and the boss and the guidance and the support and all of the other things that are wrapped up in a beautiful bow in conjunction with the remuneration and the meaningful service we provide? Ultimately, we want to be able to walk away knowing we've provided a service, we've been remunerated accordingly for it, and we can live a great life as a result. I mean, that's the golden ticket. So thank you very much, Anne. Thank you for your time, and see you later, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.